Sun's going down.
All right, welcome back from break, everyone. So I get to introduce Don. He is actually just from like our recent graduating class of 2024, and already we put him to work. So see, we'll get you involved in a lot of stuff. So anyway, but Don is a biologist. He's a herpetologist. He teaches the natural science class at Plano East.
Yes.
Yeah, at Plano East Senior High. And I was asking like, what's more intimidating, teens, adults? He says they're about the same. We can maybe be less rowdy, but I don't know. No promises. But anyway, he's going to teach us about herpetology, and it's going to be great. Thank you, Don.
Yes. Good evening. How are you guys? So my talk tonight is going to be about herpetology. That's my area of specialty. And just to give you a little bit of background information about myself, I am a native Texan. I was born and raised in South Oak Cliff, later moved to Plano and graduated from Plano East. I married my high school sweetheart. We just had our 30th wedding anniversary, so I'm very proud about that. We have two sons, one's 25, this is Drew. They both fell into the herpetology family business. Drew works with venomous stuff in Arkansas, particularly cobras and rattlesnakes on breeding programs. And Riley is an avid herpetologist and birder and a nature photographer by trade. So I'm very proud of both of these boys. They're brought up in the nature game and the herpetology game. I graduated with my bachelor's of science and master's of science in biology with emphasis in herpetology and zoology from Georgia College. And I currently teach at Plano East Senior High, my alma mater. So that's a little bit about myself. I also, back in the mid to late 90s, published several papers on fossil snakes. That's my area of specialty, is fossil snakes. I even was able to discover and got to name an extinct species of mountain king snake from Washington State. So I'm really proud of that. How did I get into herps? That's the first thing that most people usually ask, because other than people in this room, people outside of this room and this community don't understand why somebody would be into snakes and reptiles and all those things. The little background here, herpetology comes from the Greek herp, which means creeping, which probably is appropriately named there, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. In high school, I was terrified of snakes, lizards, anything to do with herps. I was absolutely terrified, wanted nothing to do with them. I was actually went to Georgia College and was going to study cetaceans, which are whales and dolphins. So completely, I was on this whole other track. I had a great advisor that had experience with marine mammals, and he left after about 2 weeks, my first 2 weeks of college, and they gave me this guy. This guy got me where I am today. This is Dr. Dennis Parmley. He's also from Texas, ended up teaching at Georgia College, and he became my new advisor. He's a pretty well-known herpetologist in the academic circles. He had all kinds of snakes and lizards in his office, and it was my job to go in there and get my add and drop courses signed by him every semester, and it completely freaked me out, but there was no other professors available. I became enamored with the reptiles. I went from, could you just sign this, to, what is that? What's it doing? So it didn't take long. It took about 6, maybe 8 weeks, and I'd already switched my entire track of what I was going to study, thanks to this guy here. So he ended up being a lifelong friend of mine. He ended up being one of the best men in my wedding. Yeah, we're still very, very close. One of the first things that I learned about reptiles and amphibians is you can see this bullfrog here. Now, this bullfrog has an interesting backstory. My first field trip, and I still didn't know anything about snakes, and I was still very, very shy about getting in the field, was with Dr. Parmley, and we're about mid-thigh deep in the Okefenokee Swamp in South Georgia. And it was during the day, and we're walking around, and there was 3 other students with us, and he goes, "Nobody move." And I'm like, okay, not moving. Did not have to ask me more than once. Some of the other students milled about. I stood firm. And there's this giant American bullfrog on this big hyacinth, this clump of hyacinths that are sitting there. And he's coming up doing this. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the bravest man I have ever seen in my life. Not because of the bullfrog, because unbeknownst to him, sitting next to the bullfrog was this. A huge Florida cottonmouth was curled up inches from this American bullfrog. And he's doing his thing. He's like, everybody just stay still. And I remember very clearly saying to him, do you think that's a good idea? Because not only did he not see the water moccasin, I didn't see the frog. So in my mind, this guy is Steve Irwin times 10. He's just going to free handle this large Florida water moccasin in front of these couple of teenagers, and I just could not believe it. He said, "I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for years." I'm like, go right ahead. I wanted to see this happen. And he's a short guy. He's only about this big. I've never seen anybody jump so high in my life, because when I said a second time, I don't think you should be doing that. I've never seen anybody free handle a venomous snake like that. And his response was, "What venomous snake?" And then turned to the side, a couple expletives, and up out of the swamp he came. From that day, I was completely hooked. That's all it took, was that interesting little, and there are tons of stories I could tell you about him not quite seeing things as he got older in the field, but we'll get to some of those stories later. So reptiles and amphibians, there's around 10,000 species worldwide of reptiles and about 8,000 species worldwide of amphibians. So they're not the most numerous of animals on the planet when you look at bugs or even just beetles by themselves, but they are very important. They have very important roles in our ecosystems, and they're completely fascinating to look at. These numbers can fluctuate year to year, which is why I put around and approximately, because new ones are being discovered not all the time, but on a more frequent basis now as humans begin to encroach on protected areas, whether it's in the Amazon, South America, places like that. And we're starting to see these animals that have never come in contact with humans before. So a little bit about reptiles. They're a diverse group. They're cold-blooded. Don't really like that word, but most people associate it with it. They're actually ectothermic. Anybody remember what ectothermic is? Cold-blooded, very good. All right. You're right there with me. Right, the surrounding area, if it's 90 degrees out, they're gonna bask and lay in the sun, and they're gonna elevate their temperature by using their environment. They're characterized by their ability to live in a wide range of habitats, from deserts to rainforests, and exhibit all kinds of crazy adaptations to live in those places. One of the extreme adaptations, anybody know that there is actually a flying snake, the genus Chrysopelia. They don't so much fly, like flapping their wings like birds, but they can glide from trees to tree. And it's absolutely amazing. And they do it with this S-shaped fashion. They flatten their bodies down, and then they kind of swim from tree to tree. There's basically 4 orders of reptiles if we look at the reptile classification scheme. The first one is the testuodines. These are your turtles and tortoises. And what a lot of people, especially the general public, doesn't realize is that the turtle doesn't go inside its shell. The turtle is its shell. The shell is a part of the turtle. That outside that you actually see here, this outside covering is almost like your fingernail to them, all right? This is all their bones, their ribs that have over time and evolution have flattened out to form the carapace, which is the top part of the turtle, and the plastron, which is the bottom part. So we have turtles, the order of turtles and tortoises, some common turtles in Texas. These are my very amorous right now. Three-toed box turtles, very common box turtle to see around here. This time of year, I have a friend that's a big-time gardener, and he has problems with slugs in his garden. And what he does is he'll take beer and put it in a little dish, pour the beer in there, the slugs come and drown. These guys love slugs. They love slugs even more when they've been soaked in beer. And every year when they go to breed and I get my bag of beer-soaked slugs from my friend Mike, this happens. So it's a funny thing to watch, a semi-intoxicated turtle. We also have the very common turtle here is the red-eared slider. We see they're everywhere. In parts of the world, they become problematic and invasive. And then another turtle that we commonly see in ponds around here is the pond slider, the yellow belly slider. The order of reptiles, this is my favorite order, the squamates. The squamates, these are our lizards and snakes. This is a shot I just took. I wish it was a little bit darker in here and you could see the colors. But if you've ever seen a greater earless lizard or a photo of one, and hopefully I can make this presentation available so that they could see some of these pictures. One of the most colorful lizards on the planet. I just took this about 3 days ago. I just got back yesterday from Big Bend, where I spend every summer about 10 days, 9 or 10 days in the desert in this cabin. And this little guy was always perched out in front of our cabin every morning. Lizards and snakes make up the squamates. Lizards typically have 4 legs, but there are lizards on this planet that do not have legs at all. Some of them only have a front pair of appendages, like the worm lizards. But all lizards share the same characteristics. You can differentiate them from snakes, is they have eyelids. Lizards have eyelids. They can close their eyes. So if you've got an elongated reptile and it has no legs, no appendages whatsoever, but it can close its eyelids, it's a lizard. Snakes are limbless and they have elongated bodies adapted for crawling and capturing prey. None of that is more evident than in the desert, because a lot of the snakes there, I mean, we all know snakes like it when it's warm out. Down there, it's too warm during the day. So during the day, all the snakes will take refuge in cracks and crevices where it's nice and cool. And it's amazing to watch them come out at dusk of these cracks and crevices that you couldn't imagine a snake could fit through. I've seen snakes fit through stuff that I just can't comprehend how they got out. Which brings me to my second story. My first job was teaching chemistry at Jasper High School here in Plano. When I came back from Georgia, teaching in Georgia, and my wife was at home with our 2 kids, and I still had a large collection of reptiles. And sometimes they get out because I was perfecting my techniques. And my wife never messaged me when I was teaching. You know, she just knew I was teaching and she would get me at the end of the day. Well, my phone kept going off. So I pulled my phone out and she's like, one of your snakes got out. I was in the front yard gardening. She just shows me this picture of this 5-foot-long, big, thick, black Texas rat snake. And she goes, but I got it and put it back up in your cage. And I'm like, okay, thank you. That's not one of my snakes. I can't believe I've been married for 30 years to this wonderful, wonderful woman of mine. But she tried and true thought it was one of mine. And if you've never been around a Texas rat snake or a Western rat snake, as they're now called, they don't have the best disposition. they're a cranky snake in the best circumstances. And she just walked up and just said, thought it was mine, picked it up, put it in a bucket, then put it in one of my cages. And she said it never offered to bite. And I guess because the snake's probably thinking, are you out of your mind? So snakes are really awesome. Some common snakes here in Texas. Here's the infamous Texas rat snake. This is the actual one that I posed out before I let it go, that she picked up, and beautiful, beautiful snake. Very, very common. Most of the snakes you see around here are going to be some type of rat snake. This is an iconic snake from Texas. This is the Western diamondback rattlesnake. Now, this is down in Big Bend again, but you can find Western diamondbacks as close as Dallas County, the southern part of Dallas County. Another common one here, this one right here is another rat snake. Does anybody know what kind of rat snake that is? Anybody familiar with the Great Plains or the Emery's rat snake? Great Plains rat snake. This is one of my females here. She just laid a nice little clutch of eggs. But another very common snake that you see around here from time to time. When people see a snake crawling up a tree and it's arboreal, most of the time it's going to be a Texas or a Western rat snake. All right. Cottonmouths don't climb trees. Copperheads semi-climb trees, but if it's climbing really good and it's going up in the air, it's typically going to be a rat snake. Another common water snake that we see around here is the blotched water snake. It's a very, very widespread throughout the state snake. This is a younger one. As it matures, these light-colored bands here and here will darken. So it'll be hard on a large adult to distinguish the pattern, but what's always prevalent is this plain belly. Some people call it the plain belly water snake, but it'll always have this nice creamy, unmarked belly. And then probably the meanest snake I've ever worked with is the diamondback water snake. Not a rattlesnake. It's not venomous. It triangulates its head when it gets ticked off, like this one is starting to do here. So a lot of people assume it's got a triangular head. That doesn't work because all snakes can flatten it out and make it look like that. But these are real pugnacious and very bitey snakes. Getting bit by one, you remember it because they have very sharp teeth, recurved teeth, and they're fish eaters. So they got to get through fish scales. They got to hold on. So these guys are really, really notorious for giving out good bites to herpers. Some of the common lizards in Texas, we've got the five-line skink, which is very similar when it's young to the next one, which is the broadhead skink. The broadhead skink and the five-line skink, up to a point till they're fully mature, all have these 5 lines and this nice blue tail. However, when they get older, the broadheads lose that pattern. They're kind of a brownish, dull olive color, and the males will get these big, especially during mating season, we'll get these big, wide red heads. And again, I always want to see what animals feel like when they bite. So when I first caught my first one, I wanted to see how bad it hurt. It hurts. It hurts. Those are huge masseter muscles responsible for closing of the jaws. This will put a nice little mark on your skin. And then what typically the lizard we see scurrying about in the leaf litter, these are little bitty guys, are the common ground skink. These are very prevalent throughout all areas throughout Texas. You'll find them scurrying about. If you've got gardens at your house and you move the leaf litter or the mulch around, you'll see one of these guys wiggle through. Notice they have very, very small limbs, and they kind of swim through the leaf litter. And a lot of people mistake them for a small snake because they're so quick and all you see is this thing moving through your garden. Yeah, they're beautiful animals. Then we have the order of Crocodilia. In Texas, we've got the American alligator. Yes, we do have American alligators here in Texas. These are large semi-aquatic reptiles. I think we're all familiar with what alligators look like. I found them just south of Dallas County in some retention ponds and in some protected areas. But they're there. They're there. And then the last order of reptiles we don't have in Texas, but I just thought it bears mentioning. This is the Sphenodontia. This is commonly known as the tuatara. The tuatara lives in New Zealand. They're only found in New Zealand. And even though they're a reptile, they occur in very cool, almost cold habitats. They're notable for retaining primitive characteristics that have been lost in other reptiles. This has to do with the number of holes in the skull and the third eye on top of their head that they use to sense light and changing ambient light. Amphibians. Amphibians too are ectothermic vertebrates. Amphibians are unique because they usually undergo metamorphosis from an aquatic larval stage, like going from a tadpole to a frog, going from a neotenic lifestyle of a salamander with the big gills like you see on axolotls to a terrestrial form of that. And some even go back and forth, will come out of the water, may mate, and then go back to an aquatic stage. So they're a very unique group of animals. We're looking at the Anura for the order. That's our frogs and toads. I think frogs and toads are really, really awesome. They have incredible leaping ability. This is one of my favorite frogs I've ever kept. This is a barking tree frog. Great little guy, great personality, a voice like you wouldn't believe. And it sounds like a medium-sized barking dog. And it's funny that my animal room at home, there's a bathroom that accompanies the room, and I'll turn on in the spring, I'll turn on the shower, and the sound of the shower will make these guys start calling. It drives my wife crazy. And then over here, we have our good buddy, the Gulf Coast toad, which is probably the most common anuran that you run into. They're found all over the place, and they eat just about anything that they can fit in their mouth. Some other common frogs and toads in Texas, we've got the bullfrog, which we've talked about. This one right here is a little bit smaller frog. You hear it calling a lot of times. This is Strecker's chorus frog. This little guy was here. We photographed at the Dinosaur Valley State Park. They were just all over there in a spring breeding mass. And then we have the leopard frog, bigger frog. Much bigger than the Streckers, not nearly as big as a bullfrog, but has a nice little leopard-like pattern and some dorsal lateral folds along here and here, those lines are, which kind of distinguish it from other frogs. Then we've got our amphibians. These are our salamanders and newts. This is what everybody thinks of are aquatic lizards. They're not lizards at all. This is a spotted salamander here that we found actually up in the north part of Texas, just north of Collin County. Some other notable ones, this is one you can find locally. This is the mole salamander. And I'll tell you where you find these guys. You find these guys usually after a nice spring rain, and you can find them at night. They'll actually be crossing roads. And when we talk about how do you herp and how do you road ride, we'll go over that in a minute, but they're a really cool little salamander. This big, they're kind of chunky, and most of the time they're like a mole, they're underground, but the rains bring them up in the spring for mating. This one's a great one. This is the slimy salamander. Anybody ever touched the slimy salamander? There's a reason it's called the slimy salamander. Not only is it slimy, but when you put it down, the slime that's left on your skin is like becomes a dark kind of glue, and it doesn't come off. All right, they secrete this viscous outer covering as a prevention to predation. When you pick them up and then you set them back down, your hands are really sticky and gluey, and it turns a dark color, and it takes a couple days just to actually wear off. So they're a neat little lizard to keep, or little salamander to keep. And then the big guy here for the state is the Texas barred tiger salamander, or the eastern tiger salamander. This guy is really cool. He goes through a larval phase where he looks like an axolotl. If you've seen an axolotl, which most people have, they go through that stage and they look just like an axolotl. They're big, hefty salamanders, and then they'll slowly come up on land. And these guys have a voracious appetite. I've had tiger salamanders before that would take prey items as big as small mice. So salamanders are like toads. Anything they can fit in their mouth is considered suitable prey. And the last one, we don't have anything like the sphenodons, but we have caecilians. And caecilians are these, they look like a cross between an eel, a worm, and a salamander is the best way to put it. They're these foot-long, segmented amphibians. They're kind of thrown in their own order. They have real reduced eyes. They have a very small mouth opening, and they stay subterranean almost their whole life. So most people don't even see them in the areas they occur. But they're a real interesting amphibian. Here's one here, and they've just found, like, this is the head here, and there's two eyes here, and this is the tail, and you can see it's segmented, so superficially it resembles a worm. That's what most people think. If it's segmented, we've learned it's usually a worm, but it's not. And they've just researched in about the past 4 or 5 years have found that mammals aren't the only animals that feed their young with like a milky type solution. These guys, they have found, they've recorded in the lab that the female, once she gives birth, her skin starts to slough off and the young will eat the skin. Well, we've known that for quite some time. But they also noticed they secrete a milky looking secretion that the young come and lap up. So they're drawing parallels to just like breastfeeding with humans, that there is a milky protein-laden substance that is being produced by this animal, and it's just secreted through pores in the skin, and the young lap it up. In Texas specifically, we've got about 170 species of reptiles and about 80 species of amphibians. We're heavy on reptiles. Our state is great because it's got all kinds. I still remember from my geography class when I was going to school here that we've got all kinds. We've got a desert, we've got coastal areas, we've got Blackland Prairies, we've got stuff in the Panhandle, we've got the hill country, we've got mountains, we've got it all here. So that's part of the reason that our numbers are so high when you compare them to other states. This guy I just took a picture of 2 days ago. This is one of the neatest reptiles I've come across. This is the black-tailed rattlesnake. You can see the black tail here. Superficially resemble a western diamondback. These are found in the southern part of the state, southwestern part of the state. Again, drunk three-toed turtles. We've got our snake up there, and then a green tree frog. So we've got a wealth of herps in this state that fit all kinds of niches. So what is herping? This is one of my favorite pictures of my boys when they were young. We've got a pond at the end of our street. And when we first moved here from Georgia, they couldn't wait. These guys have been collecting snakes since I was in graduate school. I used to wear them in my backpack. So they've been doing this, and they're like, can we go to the pond? And it was at the end of our street, maybe 9 houses down one night. And I said, yeah, sure. And of course, Mom was like, what are you talking about? And so then they come back and they're like, we found something, we got to show you. And it was one of the biggest to date diamondback water snakes I've ever seen. I still don't know how he got it. And it was eating this bullfrog. So they felt bad for the bullfrog. So they caught the snake, pulled the bullfrog out. We slobbered some antibiotics on the bullfrog and let it go, and then put the snake back in a different place so the kids wouldn't think it was eating the frog again. But herping is the art of observing and interacting with reptiles and amphibians in nature. Okay? It's getting out and seeing them in nature. It's what we do in herping is a lot different than birding or collecting insects or collecting plants. I think a lot of times it's harder than those other things because these guys are very secretive and they're very, very widespread. So what do you need to get started to be a herper? First thing is long pants for protection from bothersome insects, sharp thorns or bushes, not to mention poison ivy. Another lesson I learned the very hard way when I was in college. I got poison ivy so bad on my legs that I had to be taken to the hospital because it was gross. So please wear long pants. I know we always hit on that whenever we go out here, but always wear long pants. Nowadays, camera or phone for documenting your adventure with wonderful things like iNaturalist on your phone. Always document. If you're going to do herping and you're going to be serious about it, you got to get yourself a good snake or a field hook. All right, a good field guide and a journal. So a snake and a field hook are two different things. So right here, this is a field hook. This is used for saving your back. When you want to turn over a log, you pull it with that. This is not going to bend or break. The snake hook is simply for moving a snake out of the way. You can use a field hook to move a snake out of the way. The snake hook will break if you try to turn over logs and rocks and things with that. So always get yourself a good snake hook. It's great, and it also helps the snake out if he's in the middle of a walkway. You can safely just escort him over here. But 90% of the time, he's going to take off before you even get to him anyway. A good field guide, I have my webpage linked on here, the Snakes of the Blackland Prairies, that I did for a project for the Master Naturalist program. It's still an ongoing process because there's a lot more snakes in the Blackland Prairies than I thought. But also a journal. I really, really, really urge you guys, I could do a whole night on journaling, is keeping a journal of what you do and what you see. I've been keeping a journal since 1989. And every time I go out, I just quick when I come back, write down, hey, I saw this snake in this location. I've gotten fancy now. I've got a little GPS I take with me so I can record all kinds of things. I record the weather. I record where I found it, the habitat. A journal is great. It is so awesome when you get to go back and look at it. When you get together with other people that are like us, and you're like, oh, I can show you where to find that snake. I love going back to my journal and you can see your adventure. So I can't hit on that enough. The biggest thing I wanted to talk about with herping is the herping ethics. Now, this is a list of ethics that I've developed over the years of what you should do to be a good person out in the field. The first thing is really don't go herping alone. If you have to go alone or if you're going alone, you always tell somebody where you're going and what time you left. All right? You're going to be going into snaky places. All right? Where you can twist an ankle, where you can fall down, where you can trip on a vine. Just don't ever go it alone. And the second most important thing is the laws and regulations. It's your responsibility and nobody else's to understand what Texas Parks and Wildlife and the state of Texas and the federal government says about you interacting with wildlife. And I've got links on here to all the resources you need. I have a scientific collecting permit and an educational display permit and just a regular citizen collecting permit. Because some of the animals I want to work with in the wild, I'll collect legally. I'll do a breeding program with them. I'll let the adults go, and then I get to work with the young that I've produced. So there's that. When on foot and you're herping, you've got to know if it's public or private property. Okay, spend some time and just figure out, am I allowed to just go on this person's land? I guarantee you, I won't even say 90% of the time, 100% of the time, if you see a place that you just would really like to explore and you knock on that person's door and say you're here to look at the snakes, they will say, have at it. I've never been turned down when I've gone up and just said, hey, I'm here to photograph snakes or or look at see what kind of populations you're working with. All of them are more than welcoming and acquiesce to your request. Always obtain that permission. Always park in designated areas. Never litter and leave no trace. All right. You need to be taking water bottles with you. You need to be doing, a simple backpack first aid kit, but leave no trace of anything in the wild. When you're looking, and this is a pet peeve of mine, because when I was teaching students, when I was at the university, when you look under something, always put it back the way you found it. Okay. Roll a log over and you're looking to see anything. If nothing's there, roll it back and put it in the position you found it. These places are homes not just for herps, but for a wealth of other animals. So always leave it as you find it. Never destroy or alter the habitat. Don't go through digging through a little exposure of rocks on a cliff and start breaking and chipping rock away because you saw a snake in a crevice. Take a picture of the snake in the crevice. That's a cooler story than destroying the rock facade. Treat all herps and wildlife with respect. Everything needs to be done with the utmost respect to the animal, right? There's nothing wrong. It's, you've got your field hook handy and moving an animal over here so that he's in the sun so you can take a picture, you can write in your journal, you can record what he's doing, but show the animal respect. Pinning the head of a snake is not showing the animal respect at all. It's actually very damaging and can cause permanent and serious, maybe even life-threatening damage to the snake. That's not a safe way to handle a snake, okay? Also avoid handling of any venomous snake. I've gone through a lot of training over the years and have a lot of certifications and am constantly going to recertify in areas of how to properly handle those things. But it's not something that an amateur herper or somebody should just go out and think it's safe to pick up a rattlesnake or whatever. Leave them where they're at. Take the picture where they're at. Enjoy them where they're at. And this last one, most people don't think about it. If you're out with your kids and we're going to put bug spray and sun protection on, don't pick up the amphibians though, because that residue from that insecticide or the sunblock, their skin absorbs all that and they get it into their system. So if you're going to have that stuff on, either wash your hands so it's not directly on your hands, or just don't pick them up, and just advise others the same. My favorite thing to do is road riding, especially the older I get, because it's getting to be a pain hiking some of these hot days. Road riding is great. It's cool. You do it on the back roads, and you're just riding in a car with me, with my kids, and just enjoying listening to music and just seeing what comes across the road. When you're road riding, be aware of other vehicles front and behind you. You only pull over when it's safe, and always pull completely off the road. When you're road riding, and that's simply, and I'll talk about it in the next slide, is we're finding a road that's off the beaten path. It's a dirt road, it's a single lane road, and you're just looking for the animals to come out when it's cooler. They'll cross the roads. Some snakes come out after being up all day or in a shelter somewhere, and they get on the blacktop, and that's how they warm themselves for the evening hunt. So just make sure that you pull all the way over. And I'll mention this later, but you can see my son here, and this was a Trans-Pecos rat snake down the desert, but you have to have on a protective vest. That's required by the state of Texas. You have to have on that reflective vest whenever you're out looking at animals in road riding. It's perfectly legal to do that. You can pull off the side of the road and just past the shoulder, if you have the license, and you can take pictures of animals interacting in that little zone, and you would not believe how many animals are found on the road or just off the shoulder. So basically there's three types of herping. The first one is most of the time set aside for academics and serious research, which we all in here could do this. This is trapping or artificial structures, the use of drift fences, plywood, minnow traps, and your own homemade funnel traps. I've got a couple of papers that I've done sampling, and I really want to do somewhere around here is the terrestrial drift fence. So basically this is aluminum flashing, and you get some poles and you just make a fence this way, this way, this way, and this way. And then you bury 5-gallon buckets level with the ground. And the snakes, believe it or not, and even the lizards, when they hit the flashing, their inclination is not to go up. It's to go left or right. And they'll go left or right, and then they'll fall into the bucket. You check your buckets every day, and then you record length, species, time of day, which bucket it was caught in, which direction it was facing, and you can start developing a very solid study of the animals of that area. You can also use, this is a homemade, just a 2-liter Coke bottle. Cut the top off, invert it. Now you've got a funnel trap. All right, you can use that in a creek or a stream, and little newts and salamanders will go in there. If you're sampling water snakes, this is a good one, as long as the water level doesn't go above about here, so you don't drown the snake. I've used these before where the snakes come in, and it's just like with the drift fence. You put these along the edge of a bank, they swim around the edge of the bank, they go in the funnel, and funnels, for some reason, confuse herps to no end. They don't figure to go back out the other side. The other type of herping, as we talked a little bit about, is walking or hiking. First thing you need to do is find an area to explore. There's a lot more prep work, in my opinion, when you're going to say you're going to go out and look for herps than there is if you're just going to go birding. You got to determine the type of habitat. What's out there? What does the land look like? What could I find? Use a field guide to determine the kinds of herps that are there. And on my website, I list all the field guides for this area. Use Google Maps and plot a course. Look for areas where you can look at what's called the edge effect. Now, the edge effect is where we have two different ecotones actually coming together here. So if you look right here, the biodiversity is going to be greatest right where these two come and meet. So if you've got a big grass prairie and then the grove of trees start, right there where the grass and the grove of trees, you're going to find your highest biodiversity of species. So that's the edge effect. Also near water or any place with debris or deadfall to turn over. Anytime you find a log that looks like this, again, we're going to put it back just the way we found it. This is a great place to look for small ground-dwelling snakes, copperheads, if you're into that, which I am. We've caught more copperheads over at Bob Woodruff than we would imagine. It's great. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about road riding. You actually can do road riding during the day, especially in the spring after it rains. Rain makes the ground-dwelling herps get out and move. All right? It'll flush them out. They'll wander, and they inadvertently cross a road or a blacktop somewhere, and you're able to observe these animals as they're crossing the road. But anytime at nighttime from dusk to dawn, depending on what you're looking for as to whether or not you're going to be staying up till 2 a.m. or whether or not you're just going to be there from 6:30 to 10:30. The Trans-Pecos rat snakes that we find in Big Bend, they're almost like clockwork. It'll be pitch black, the sun's down, it's 9:30, 9:35. They won't come out for another hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. You can almost set your watch by it. Because I've driven these roads in Big Bend and the snakes just aren't out. I'm thinking there's no Trans-Pecos rat snakes here. They're there. They're just not ready to come out yet. So if you know your animal and you know the lay of the land, then you can have a much better experience. One app I would recommend to everybody, and I've had people ask me about this before, what do I do? And we may get to some of this in the Q&A. What do I do if I'm bitten by a venomous snake or something like this? This app right here, the Snake Bite 911, is the official algorithm for how you treat snake bites. This app is great. It walks you through if you do happen to have the unfortunate incidents of being bit by a venomous snake. It tells you what to do, what to look for, what to say to the attending physician in the ER, what to show the physician in the ER. This is by the board certified toxicologists throughout the United States. It's very, very user friendly. I've never had to use it before, but I know people that have, and emergency room doctors don't know how to treat a snake bite. The vast majority of them don't understand how to treat snake bite. The vast majority won't give you antivenom at the onset of a snake bite when you should have it. They wait for symptoms to occur and for certain things to manifest. It's better to head it off, but the app walks you straight through all that. So that's my talk on herps. Hope you've got a little bit of background knowledge of what herps are, where you go to find them, how you interact with them, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to take those now. Thank you. Yes. Hold on one sec.
So when you turn over a log to look for a snake or a rock or something,
Yeah.
I always think the snakes just like run off. How do you like?
Most
catch
of the
'em
most
or-
of the time you would think that they would, but they're kind of shocked at first. So you're usually able to get a good picture or two, or get a good look at it before it darts off. But most of them are in a secure place, and it's just kind of like that shock of, why is there light here all of a sudden? So you usually get a good look at them before they do. They don't just dart instantly away. Good question. Yes.
How do you get the education trunk permits and stuff that you were talking about? You have to have permits to do the herping on the side of the road. and
Right.
Some of those things.
The one for the side of the road is if you're just doing the general population one, it's like $35. It's 25. You have to buy a hunting permit, and then you get the reptile and amphibian endorsement, which is another $10 or something like that. That's all you have to do. And all it is using the Texas Parks and Wildlife site, and you have to get, but most people don't realize you can't just get the reptile and amphibian endorsement. You have to buy a hunting license and then the reptile and amphibian. And they just.
So the things you mentioned that you do in your journal are similar to what like iNaturalist already documents. What is something that is not listed in iNaturalist that you put in your journals?
Well, one of the things that I see is, and I may be wrong, I don't see where there's a place where you can put weather and the little things that make that moment with that animal unique. It's on the north side of the pond. It's sunny out, it's high humidity, there's a strong wind, we just had rain. Those little nuances, I think you really get a better feel for that encounter with that animal and how you would be able to find that animal again by journaling. Yeah.
Could you please tell us a little bit more about what you do at Big Bend and like herping and stuff like that over there?
Big Bend is great. Has anybody been to Big Bend? I know you guys have. Great. Yeah, we stay in the Christmas Mountains, which is right off Highway 118. We go about 20 miles off the highway, and it's a little cabin that's at the foot of the Christmas Mountains. We do a lot of road riding. We're off the trails by about noon because it's just way too hot in the summer. We always go at the end of June and the beginning of July because that's their rainy season. So a chance to get any kind of good rain, thunderstorms, is end of June, 1st of July. And when you do that, it's amazing. The desert comes to life. Not only the cactuses and things like that that'll bloom overnight, but the spadefoots and some of the other Texas toads just spring to life. Like the spadefoots down there are a little toad, and when it rains, they'll come out, mate, lay their eggs, fertilize them, and within 24 to 48 hours before the water dries up, the tadpoles are already hatching out. So it's a remarkable thing that you can actually watch them go from mating pairs to free swimming tadpoles to them climbing out. Yeah.
I have a question. It might be kind of a dumb question, but like the worm-like amphibians you talked about, like what exactly distinguishes them from like not being a worm and being an amphibian?
The which amphibians?
The worm-like ones.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. What distinguishes them from other amphibians?
Like what makes them like not a worm, I guess.
Oh, they're not a worm. They have all the amphibian characteristics. They've got the respiratory system where they kind of breathe through their skin, like a lot of the group of lungless salamanders do. They've got the physical attributes of an internal skeleton. They're vertebrates, so they're not, an insect or an arthropod. So they fall right in line with all that. Yes. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, the question is about Rio Grande chirping frogs. Could you say a few words about how they got to North Texas and how far north are these darn things now?
That I don't know. They are in North Texas. I have heard them calling. I'm not sure how accidental transport is probably the how they got here. I don't know how far north they currently spread, but they're definitely here. Yeah.
I've heard they came in on sod pallets from
Yep.
the valley.
Yeah,
So-
that's total. A lot of the herps get transported through stuff like that. There's a lot of animals that get dispersed that way, and herps latch onto things like sod pallets or nurseries when they dig up their plants and they're moving. A lot of these animals are subterranean or will burrow in when it's hot.
It's incredible that they have survived 2 really cold winters.
You wouldn't think they'd make it
And
this
I've had
far.
them 5 years in my backyard. Drove me crazy. I couldn't figure out what kind of bird it was.
They're not a quiet frog, that's for sure.
I remembered my question.
Yes.
So is there a certain time of the month that the toads will start making all kinds of noise and just, you can't even talk over them?
It depends on the environmental factors. It has to
It's
do
in the
with,
backyard of my friend who has a pond.
yes, and I've got one in my pond that I mistakenly built right behind my bedroom window, so I hear it incessantly. And it's most of the time it's the Gulf Coast toads in these neighborhood ponds. And it depends on things like barometric pressure. It depends on the time of the year, the temperature and the humidity levels. And that triggers them to go into these breeding and calling spats. And they are loud because we can't hear it over the TV. Another reason I can't believe my wife is still with me. Any other questions? Yes.
So my mom and I, we sometimes plant in our yard and stuff, and we use this app called Picture This for different plants and such. Is there like an equivalent of that for reptiles and insects so far?
I have not found one that is very reliable at all. I know with iPhone, with some of their stuff, the iPhone, you can if you take a picture and you swipe up, it'll tell you, is it a plant or a snake? It gets it right about 50% of the time. But I have not found anything as far as the herb goes that's reliable like that I'm aware of. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
How do we find your webpage?
I've got it embedded in this PowerPoint, and then I'll make sure that Rick or somebody, I'll give it to them and they can put it up on the website, I guess.
I can do that.
Okay.
Carol Clark would like to know if you want to come to Cook County to have a herping party.
Hey, that sounds like fun. Herp and party go together. Absolutely.
And then one more, do you do guided herping trails? Would love to join one.
I was planning on doing one with the kind of coincided with this talk. I just haven't been able to work it all out yet. But yeah, I am talking with Rick and others about doing a
I
guided
think we'll work one out, won't we?
Yeah, we will.
Do y'all want to work one out with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. We'll work one out.
You're good? All right, thank
All
you
right,
so
thank
much.
you. Thank you, guys. You guys were awesome. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
And then, Rick, did you say you
I did. Okay. And thank you, Don. That was really good. Really, really good. Hope y'all enjoyed Don's talk. That was a lot of fun. And we do need to set up a little herping hike, I guess. Okay, we got to take for the in-person people, we got to put some chairs up, but we also have some tables we have to put out, right? Okay, so our long tables in the back and or out here that were used for food, we need to put 3 there.